Oh my goodness me.
Mr. Logothetis.
Light Watkins, the
How
legend,
are you, sir?
The legend of Hollywood and Mexico City. What an honor and a surprise. You're a good man, and I'm grateful that you didn't tell me that it was going to be you. We've been texting back and forth, and you knew.
We have.
And you didn't tell me.
That's right. Well, that's the idea. I love this concept. I think this is awesome. And I'm excited and honored to be one of your guests on your podcast.
Wow. Light Watkins. Good man. Good man. So where do we begin? I mean, clearly I know you, right? But I didn't know that you were going to be on the podcast today.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, for those that don't know you,
yes,
a little bit about who Mr. Light Watkins is.
Light Watkins is an inspirational speaker, writer, teacher. Some people may refer to me as a guru. I've been teaching meditation for a long time. So guru and meditation are like peanut butter and jelly. And I'm a nomad and I'm a minimalist. And I have been traveling throughout the world over the last few years up until the pandemic happened, which obviously traveling is not very pandemic friendly. So I decided to post up down here in Mexico City for a little while. And yeah, I'm also a podcast host, which is where some people may be familiar. People who've closely, your super fans may be familiar with our podcast interview on At the End of the Tunnel. So
yes, I remember that very well. So, like, tell me, how did you go from? First of all, what inspired you to change your name to Light? Because I know that you weren't born with that name per se,
right?
So, what inspired you to change your name to Light?
Wow, that's a good question. And you want the long version or the short version of that story?
The long version.
The long version. So I had just moved to Los Angeles in 2002. And as anyone who lives in Los Angeles may know, for any meaningful amount of time, is that you meet a lot of people who have sort of reinvented themselves, right? So I knew a guy named Truth, and I knew another guy named Spirit and Conscious, and you meet Sky, you meet Tree. And so I'm meeting all these people, and then I was going to a raw food restaurant back in those days named Leaf Cuisine. It's not around anymore, but at that restaurant, I met a guy named Pineapple Head. Right. And so meeting Pineapple Head inspired me to strike up a conversation with a friend of mine about people in LA who had changed their names. So my friend and I decided to play this hypothetical game, which is, if you were going to change your name to a word from the dictionary, what would it be? He chose ocean, and he said, what are you going to change your name to? And I was like, I don't know. I can't think of anything. And he started counting down 5, 4, 3, 2. And I just blurted out Light. I don't know where Light came from, but it felt right. Even after I said it, I was like, yeah, Light. I would change my name to Light. And we laughed. And then for some strange reason that I can't explain, even today, the idea to change my name to Light just kept percolating. And at that point in my life, I was in my early 30s, and I had had enough experiences where I took some leaps of faith and things worked out for the best. And I recognized that the feeling I had to change my name was very similar to the feeling I would have before I would take some of those other leaps of faith. So I kind of knew that I had to do something about it. And the most efficient thing to do would be just to change my name instead of, trying to work angles and negotiate and barter with my heart. And again, I didn't know why. I wasn't particularly, enthusiastic about the idea. I actually like my birth name, which I don't really say a lot these days, but eventually at some point, I guess it'll come out. But I just knew that was what I was feeling called to do. So I went to one of the guys who changed their names and I said, hey, how does it work? Right. So then my rational mind started getting into play. Do I need to go to the court? Do I need to file papers? How much does it cost? All the questions. And this particular guy said, no, all you have to do is just start introducing yourself as, what do you want to call yourself again? And I said, Light. He said, let's just start calling yourself Light. And then people will start eventually calling you Light. That's how it works. So I was like, all right, fair enough. And that conversation took place about 2 weeks before I believe it was my 32nd birthday. So I figured what better time than to take on this new identity on my birthday, right? And I just so happened to be teaching yoga at the time. And I just so happened to have a class that morning of my birthday that I was planning to teach. And there was going to be about 40 or 50 people in the class. So then I thought, what better opportunity to make the big announcement than to do it in a class of 40 or 50 people? Because if you tell one person, you can still change your mind. If you tell 2 people, still change your mind. If you tell 40 people, you're committed. So I had a plan that at the end of my yoga class, this is 2 weeks before the yoga class. So at the end of the yoga class, I was planning to make the announcement that I'm going to be changing my name to Light. And so flash forward, the class takes place. It's like the fastest yoga class I've ever taught because I knew that I was going to do this life-changing thing at the end. I do the announcements, and then I start having this sort of outer body experience, kind of like in a movie where I'm watching myself make this announcement. And I say to the class, I say, by the way, from now on, I'm going to start referring to myself as Light. And you're invited to call me that or not, but it's up to you. But that's what I'll be calling myself. And again, this is Los Angeles, right? Where people changing their names is like going to Starbucks or something. It's not that newsworthy. And so I got blank stares, and then people started sort of awkwardly leaving the room because they didn't really know what to say. And I was a little disappointed because I didn't get the reaction that I was, I guess, hoping. I don't know what I was expecting, some sort of New Year's Eve celebration type of reaction. And anyway, I'm looking in the corner of the room, and there's this one woman in the class who's like wide-eyed, like she had just seen a ghost. So now I'm like locked in onto her, and she's walking towards me, and I'm walking towards her. And I don't know what she's going to say, but she's someone who I met about 3 or 4 months prior to this class. And I met her in a restaurant with her little 5-year-old son. I was with a friend. They were sitting next to us. We started a conversation. She found out I was a yoga teacher. This was back when being a yoga teacher was actually unique, right? Now everyone and their mother's a yoga teacher. But back then it was like, oh, wow, you're a yoga teacher. Where do you teach? And I told her, she says, I'll come to your class. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I didn't expect her to come to the class because people say that kind of thing all the time. But somehow she finagled. I was teaching in a gym. She finagled her way into the class 2 or 3 times. She wasn't a member of the gym where I was teaching. And she happened to be there this particular day. I never asked her how she got in. She never gave me a heads up when she was going to come. And she had only been there a couple of times, right? So anyway, she's coming up to me and I go, what's going on? And she goes, oh my God. And I say, what? She goes, oh my God. Turns out her 5-year-old son, Tristan, had come into her bedroom that morning. And she said it was apparent that he had had some sort of dream. And in his sort of sleepy innocence, he said, "Mommy, I want to change my name." She said, "What do you want to change your name to, honey?" He said, "Light. I want to change my name to Light. Can you start calling me Light?" Wow. So then the hairs on the back of my neck stood up.
As they're standing up for me right now.
And I thought, of course, the universe or nature or whatever sends this confirmation through the innocence of a child. And she just so happened to be there on that particular day. And he just so happened to say that to her or have that dream that morning. And I made that plan 2 weeks before, right? So everything just sort of came together. And that's probably been the most obvious confirmation that I've had. I've had many confirmations, but that's probably the most obvious one that when you listen to your heart, you're doing what you're supposed to do, which you know all about. So yeah, that was the change my name experience. And I've been Light ever since. 16 years now.
It's truly amazing. And what I'd love to know is how your life changed when you changed your name.
Again, another great question. When I thought about it later, for instance, when I was 19, I had a couple buddies come to visit me. I was in Miami on South Beach at the time at an internship. And, as 19-year-olds do, we were drinking and having a good time. And somebody had the idea to go get a tattoo. We should all get tattoos. So we went to the tattoo shop, Tattoos by Lou on South Beach. I don't even know if it's still there or not, but went to the tattoo shop and, they have racks and racks of little iconic icons and different ideas. And so I'm just like flipping through the thing, looking for a tattoo, right? And I got this Eye of Horus tattoo, and I got it on my upper back. And it's the only tattoo I have, and the only one I will probably ever get. And obviously, people ask you, what does it mean? Why did you get that? And so later on, you develop a meaning that you associate with the tattoo. So the same kind of experience happened to me with Light. Like I didn't really think much about it in the beginning when I first said it, when I blurted it out. But then later on, and maybe it was a subconscious thing, I don't know. But later on, I had remember watching the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? Remember that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? That's where Joe Dispenza, became famous and all these other spiritual teachers. And there was that doctor, the Japanese doctor Emoto, I believe his name was. He was doing the experiments with water crystals. And this stuff is all, heavily controversial because it's, some people say it's not scientific and all this kind of stuff. But for whatever reason, it left an impression on me when he would expose these water crystals to high vibration words like love and light. And then the crystals would form these really beautiful symmetrical shapes. And then he would expose the same crystals to low vibration words or music, like hate, fear, and devil worship music and stuff like that. And the crystals would become distorted and brown and ugly. And so I had associated light with high vibration. And I felt like, well, one of the positives of this thing is that whenever someone else calls the name Light, that is good for them and it's good for me. So it's kind of like community service. And, you can't be an asshole when you're walking around with a name like Light. So it kind of makes you accountable just moment to moment in a way, like the kindness guy. Like you have to be kind. It doesn't matter what kind of mood you're in. If you're known as the kindness guy, it forces you to find that in your heart, even in moments where you don't feel like it. And so I thought, that's definitely painting myself into a corner, calling myself Light. But if you have to be in a corner, that's the corner I want to be. I want to be in the light corner. I don't want to be in the darkness corner or the shadow corner or anything like that.
I've had a lot of goosebumps in the past 15 minutes And as you were talking about putting yourself in the corner by calling yourself light, you then basically said exactly what I was about to say to you, which was, by calling myself the kindness guy, by going out into the world and kind of spreading kindness, I have put myself in a box where I must always be kind, right? And I actually just had a flashback to a moment where I really wasn't very kind at all. And I was like, oh yeah, oh my goodness, I hope they didn't know I was the kindness guy.
You're going to get canceled.
It would have been done, right?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, so I can see how, like, vibrationally, when people call you light, when you call yourself light, because that's your name, that's what I know you by. I know you as being a high vibrational fellow. Again, how, apart from like changing the vibration of the way you live, which clearly is the pinnacle of like creating the perfect life. If you live at a high vibration, magical things can happen. And if you live at a lower vibration, magical things don't happen, right? But for the people who are listening, who need something, let's say, ultra specific, left brain people, how did changing your name change your life?
I would say it made me more honest and more authentic because of carrying that weight of, the name light and all the things that it means. Naturally, you're not going to be perfect. You're human. You're going to do human things. And it's harder to hide when you have this name. And especially if you're a public figure, which on some level I am a public figure, same as you. And so it makes me lead with more authenticity and more honesty. Instead of trying to pretend like I'm more perfect than I actually am, I'll actually speak to the imperfect parts of myself a lot more. And I'll write about those a lot more. And I'll show those a lot more in the content that I create and that I post. And in hopes of giving other people permission to do the same, right? Now, practically speaking, I get the question, is that your real name? That's probably the most common question people ask. And I have a bit of a contentious relationship with that question, to be perfectly honest with you, because it's really the way people ask sometimes, like, is that your real name? It's like when get that kind of tone, I'm oftentimes tempted to lie and just say, yes, it is my real name, actually, because then it begs the question, what is real name? Is the real name, is Malcolm X the real name, or is Malcolm Little the real name, right? Is Michael King the real name, or is Martin Luther King? These are all people who change their names.
Yes.
And so the name doesn't define anything. And the story behind why you think the name is whatever it is not my problem, right? My opportunity is to live the best life, the most authentic life I can. And, and I think that is what infuses the name that I have, whatever it is. Like I said, I love my birth name. Like it's not a situation where I was ashamed of the birth name or I didn't want anyone to know about it or anything like that. But it's like, that was the past. And so, yeah, we could talk about what I studied as a junior in college, but that's not really relevant to what I'm doing now. Let's talk about what I'm doing right now. And if the situation presents itself where, it is appropriate and it feels like it's going to add value to the conversation to talk about what happened in the past, then I'm game to do that as well. And sometimes that is the case, and it turns into these really beautiful conversations. But I'm not into feeding someone's curiosity just so they can kind of reinforce their story about what they think I am all about. And so that tension, I have to kind of live with that I didn't have before. But again, that's that's a champagne problem. That's a problem I'd like to have. Somebody wants to define success as you having the problems that you want to have, as opposed to having problems you don't want to have.
I get it. So look, changing your name is radical, it's courageous, it's brave, and it's clearly set you up on a beautiful life path. Not perfect, there's no perfection, right? But you're on a beautiful life path. I've known you for, I don't know, maybe a decade. I don't know how long it's been, right? And you're clearly on a beautiful life path. And the persona that you put out to the world is the truth, because that's what I've seen when there are no cameras, when, we're just sitting in the car talking, me and you, et cetera, right? Some people may not want to go down the radical path in order to change the way that they live, right? For whatever reason, yeah? They don't want to jump off the cliff. They don't feel that the net will appear, whatever it may be. They don't go down the radical path. How can you get them to change their lives without going down the radical path?
Well, Malcolm X, speaking of Malcolm X, he said something that really impacted me. He said, and he didn't create this, but he popularized it. He said, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And because people like me, I'm paraphrasing now, but because people like me exist, then they're going to pay more attention to the moderates, So the extremists, I consider you and I to be on the more of the extreme end of the spectrum. And you've done that for me without even realizing it. Like there's some goals I've set for myself and, some ways that I push myself because I said, look, if Leon can travel around the fucking globe with no money, certainly I can do this, this thing that's going to make me uncomfortable for an afternoon. I could do that. Right. And I think that's our calling, so to speak, is that those of us who are willing to do more radical things, we are the beacons. We're the point of reference for people who may not want to go as far as we've gone, but they'll go a lot further because they know that we exist and they're familiar with our work and our actions and things like that, and our humanity, right? And our humility. And again, that's one of the things that I really admire about you and your work is that you don't pretend to be, this angel, this saint. You're just a guy who made this sort of pact with himself, and you're still grappling with your own inner demons while you're going through the whole process. And I think that's very special and beautiful because people can relate to that. And so I just try to be as relatable as possible so that those people who want to kind of push the boundaries of their own comfort zone a little bit more at certain times in their life, they have someone like me, someone like you to look at and say, well, if Light can go nomadic at 48 years old, when all of his peers are with families and kids and grandkids, and this guy is out here living out of a backpack in Mexico City with no prospects of dating anyone anytime soon, and but still want to have a family one day, and I like being comfortable as much as anybody likes being comfortable, and having nice things and all of that. I just have challenged myself to get on without many of those things and just to see what happens, because I'm just curious about these things. And I would say that whoever's listening to this, whatever you're curious about, it doesn't have to be anything big and life altering, such as going around the globe or living from a backpack, but maybe it's about a particular person you pass every day on the street, and maybe one day you just go up to that person and say, hey, I just want to introduce myself. I see you all the time, and I just wanted to know you because you seem you're glowing all the time, or whatever the thing that's making you curious. And that could be your version of, doing a kindness diary tour or living from a backpack, right? You start small, and then maybe who knows where that's going to take you. I don't know. I'll tell you another quick story. In my meditation teaching over the years, I worked with this one woman who was she suffered from hodophobia. I don't know if you know what that means. Hodophobia means someone who has a fear of leaving home, meaning leaving their hometown and going anywhere. And so she meditated I taught her to meditate, and she was very consistent, and she had this job she didn't really love. And so she ended up quitting the job. And eventually, about 2 years later, I posted about this retreat that I was hosting in India, and she signed up for the retreat. Now, I didn't know anything about the hodophobia, right? So she signs up for the retreat. She sends me a few emails saying she's a little bit nervous. I'm like, oh, that's natural, whatever, I'll see you in India. So we meet up in India, and then we're sitting down having tea one day, and she tells me the whole story. She's been suffering from hodophobia. She's like in her 40s or maybe even 50s. So she's never left her hometown in Canada. And a lot of people would hear this story and they would think, congratulations, she broke through her anxiety or whatever was keeping her homebound. And the way I saw it was she broke through her hodophobia when she took control of her mental health and she started her meditation practice, and she was consistent with her meditation practice. And eventually she woke up with the idea to actually travel away. And so it wasn't really the fear of going to a new country or the fear of terrorism or the fear of catching the Zika virus or something like that that stopped her. It was whatever anxiety she had been carrying around with her, probably from childhood, that her inner work, her practices like meditation helped her to become liberated from. And then the most natural idea, which a lot of us have, which is, let me go and do something that I wouldn't normally do. It occurred to her and she was able to follow through on it. And I feel like we all have, those, and we had it as kids. Let me jump off this tree branch. Let me make a castle. Let me, imagine myself being in space and turn the living room into the moon. And, we have this as a child, and then it somehow gets beaten out of us through just dealing with the blows of everyday life and all the expectations society places on us to be successful and make all this money and, accumulate things. And they get us thinking happiness is on the other side of this stuff. And so what I've seen in my work through teaching people and exposing people to the inner practices is that it's really hard to stay at a dead-end job. It's really hard to stay in an unfulfilling relationship when you are waking up inside and when your creativity is becoming more and more enlivened inside, and you become that person who is the example in your community, in your friend circle, for everyone else to take those smaller leaps of faith, which just could be getting out of this job that is sucking your soul, or it could be getting out of this relationship that's abusive, and you felt like before you've never been able to do it, and now you are, and you just have the idea to do it. So I would say, if you don't have inner practices happening on a regular basis, that's step one in moving in the direction of accessing your full potential.
I want to tell you a little story based on what you just said to me. As you know, I've done a lot of crazy things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of
Bali adventures.
Oh, goodness me. One of the craziest things I did was, and I don't want to mention any names, but I did with a fellow for 2 weeks. I went to India, and you actually know who I'm talking about. And I ended up, he took away my money, took away my passport, took away my phone, everything. And I just had to follow him for 2 weeks in India. And I did it once, and it was life-changing. And the first time I did it, he said to me, you should really meditate. And I was like, yeah, I'll think about it. All right. And I didn't. And the next year I came back, and like a fool, I did it again. right? And this time we went to India, we went to Bali, we went to Thailand, and I did the same thing. At this time, he looked me straight in the eye, said, "Have you been meditating?" I was like, he knew I hadn't, right? He could sense it. He's like, "Have you been meditating?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Okay." And I said, "Look, can you help me to meditate? I need you to help me. I need you to say one sentence that will make me meditate. Be like Morpheus, right?" And he looked at me, and I never forget this. He looked at me and he said, "If you don't meditate, you're fucked." And I was like, "Oh, all right." Ever since that day, over 10 years ago, I've meditated every single day. And when there are times where my meditation is not great, because there are times when that happens, right? When I kind of do it, but I'm not really doing it. That guy's words come into my mind. If you don't meditate, you're fucked. So the reason why I told you that story, I don't think I've ever told you that before, but the reason why I'm telling you that story is, how would you kind of inspire people to meditate without that one sentence? Like, what would you say to them? Why should they meditate? Why should they go inside themselves? Like in the most simplistic terms possible.
I really love that line that that he told you.
I actually was thinking about writing a book called "If You Don't Meditate, You're Fucked," and then a tagline saying, "and all the other bits of wisdom I've been told on my journeys," or something like that.
I love that. I was going to say, I don't know if that's going to play well with the kindness brand, but I think the tagline, the tagline actually brings it back around. I think it's perfect. Yeah. I would say that the happiness you are truly, truly seeking is inside of you. And if you don't sit down and tap into it as often as you can, you're going to spend your whole life searching for it outside of yourself. And I think, actually Schopenhauer, to give you a author Schopenhauer quote, he said that finding happiness within is difficult, but finding it outside of yourself is impossible. I love that.
That's a good one.
But that's what it is, it really just comes down to, and when I say happiness, we're not talking about walking around with a smile plastered on your face, right? The way I like to talk about happiness or define happiness is a state of contentedness, because when we're experiencing suffering, and suffering is very subjective, by the way, different people can be in the same situation and one person can be enjoying themselves and the other person can be suffering. And so when you are experiencing suffering, you're basically having an experience that you would rather not be having for whatever reason. And you can create all kinds of stories that will lead to these reasons. And that ends up being a very large part of a lot of people's life experience. They're almost always in situations that they would rather not be in, right? I'm in a financial situation I'd rather not be in. I live in a house that I'd rather not live in. I have a car that I'd rather not have. I really want to have this other car. I really want to have this other house. I really want to have this other job, this other title, this other amount of knowledge. And so we can spend our lives very easily hoping that the next thing, the next achievement, the next accomplishment is going to bring the happiness that we think is just around the corner. But if we go back and do a forensic analysis on all those other moments we've already experienced, every time we turn that corner and we got the thing, right, and we had the wave of joy, that elusive happiness just dissipated and we were kind of back in the same place we were in before. Now, granted, this is after our basic needs have been met. If you escape from a serial killer, obviously you're going to be happier than you were tied up down in the basement, right? Just to use an extreme example. But once you have your basic needs met, these other worldly accomplishments even scientists are saying this now, they don't lead to greater amounts of happiness. The only thing that's been shown to have an effect on your baseline level of happiness is your sense of self, which is your capital S self, not your small sense, but this part of you that's connected to everyone and everything else, and your sense of gratitude for what you have. And so I say, if you can be grateful now, then you're going to be able to be grateful around the corner. If you're not able to be grateful for what you have now and feel happy and connected to what you have now, there's nothing that's going to happen around the corner that's going to lead you to magically have more of that.
You just reminded me of what I was doing 3 weeks ago in a field in New York State. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, Leon, what were you doing in a field 3 weeks ago in New York State? Right? And I'm about to show you. I had this, I went into a field. I sat there for 64 hours with no food. No, I had food. With no phone, no books, no music, nothing. It was literally just me and the field. And I had a journal. Yeah. And in that journal, I wrote the following. And it goes back to what you just said. Sorry, as you know, this is not, I don't even know. Okay, here we go. So I wrote this. I said, I am going insane. No music, no books, no phone, no TV, no food, sort of, because I was on a cleanse, no internet, no family to message me, no emails, no shower, no dog, no snacks, no trips in the car, no girlfriend, no WhatsApp, no YouTube, no soccer, no moped, no shopping, no talking to people, no complaining to others, no news. Help me. Right? This is all like I wrote this down. Yeah. And then I wrote, why is it so hard to be free of all distractions? Yeah. And it's easy on some level to sit here and say, well, you know, let's all meditate. Let's be calm. Let's just like not worry too much about what's going on in the world. But when we actually do that, like I did for 64 hours, I mean, there are people that do it for 64 years, right? It was so difficult to do for 64 hours. Why is it so difficult just to do nothing?
I would say it's the same reason it's so difficult to run a marathon, because we try to do it all at one time. It's much easier to run for 15 minutes a day over the course of a year than it is to run 26 miles at one time. And so that's what I encourage people to do. In fact, you know, our mutual friend who we were speaking about earlier, who took you to India and took all your stuff away. I remember he posted, he's a big runner, and he posted something on Facebook years and years ago that I actually included in my book because it inspired me so much, my most recent book. He said, I just ran a marathon, but I didn't run it in 26 miles. I ran it in 1 mile 26 times. And I think that philosophy of taking a task, even if 15 minutes feels like 26 miles, taking it just one moment at a time, 1 minute at a time. Okay, I got through this minute. Let's see what this next minute reveals. And then, you know, just taking it just like that with everything that makes us uncomfortable. And then before we know it, actually, we may not know it. We may not realize that we left the comfort zone until later on when we do a Netflix special about it, or we write a book about it. And then we see the change that occurs in other people when they reach out to us and, oh my God, I'm so inspired by what you did. Meanwhile, if anybody was like watching you in that field, they probably would say, oh, this guy's out there peacefully, just like journaling. He's probably enjoying himself. And meanwhile, you're having this whole existential crisis inside. Just like when you're running, people can't tell you're hating every single step and minute of it. They just see you running and they're inspired because all they see is one foot keeps going in front of the other foot, right? And you're getting closer and closer and closer to the goal that you set for yourself. What you're thinking about inside really is irrelevant to the impact that you're having on the world. And I think if we can hold those two truths simultaneously, where we're not making it about ourselves, even though we're going through our own process, but we're also able to see that there's a bigger picture. The reason why I'm doing this, I don't even understand, but something inside, deep, 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 deep within that I've been able to connect to because I've been meditating for 10 or however many years is compelling me to keep going and put myself out in this very uncomfortable situation. And I don't know where it's going to turn out, right? But then lo and behold, 5 years later, there's 3 chapters in your book about this experience. And these are the most inspiring chapters for somebody who picks this book up 300 years from now, right? Who hasn't even been born yet. And they read that. And then that person ends up becoming the president of the World Federation of Countries. And they end up coming up with the idea of how to, solve climate change, even if we're even around at that point. But you just never know, right? And I think just taking you out of the equation and understanding that this is bigger than you, whatever you're feeling called to do is bigger than you. When you first have the idea to go to the field, to run the marathon, to become a nomad, that inception point is happening because you're being given a mission if you choose to accept it. And you have to know that a proper mission is going to include several points along the path where you're going to seriously want to give up. You're going to seriously want to quit. You're going to seriously want to stop. If you're not tempted to quit every day, that's not a proper mission. A proper mission means that you are going to want to stop because it's uncomfortable and no one else is doing it. No one else is probably even noticing that I'm going through all this suffering. Why am I doing this to myself? It doesn't make any sense. Those are all the telltale signs of a proper calling, a proper life mission. If it was easy to do, everybody would be doing it. So
it's beautiful that you just said that. I want to read what I wrote. Another thing I wrote. I want to give up, but I will not. Why do you want to give up? Because it's too hard. I know it's hard. I really do. Then I say, that's not too helpful. Why is it hard? Because you are used to distractions, and those distractions have taken you away from your true unconditioned self. And then I go, I want to give up. Clearly, I didn't give up, right? And clearly. I think that's kind of like the difference between someone who makes it, whatever makes it means, to their own goal, and someone that doesn't. Because there are many of us that are like, you know what? Oh, forget it. I'm going to go home. My car was there. I could have gone home. I could have left. I had my keys. Do you know how many times I had my keys? I'm like, I'm just going to leave. But no, I'm not. I'm going to keep on going. And I think that's a beautiful kind of expression of getting in touch with our own humanity and saying, look, this is what we're here to do.
Yeah.
Let's just keep going. And I promise you, if you keep doing this, you will become the person that you wanted to be. I sat in that field for 64 hours. If I'd sat in that field and I came out changed, not like Gandhi changed, but I came out changed. If I'd sat in that field for 640 hours, I would have come out like, I don't know.
Levitating,
right? Yeah. You know what? I could literally sit here and talk to you for hours. But unfortunately, we can't talk for hours.
But I do want to say, just because I want to make this relatable to people, because for anyone who's ever worked out, it's the same feeling, right? If you're doing a good workout, you want to quit several times, and you're negotiating with yourself and you're bartering with yourself. Maybe I'll just cut it down a little bit. Maybe I won't do 4 sets. Maybe I'll just do 2 sets. Maybe I won't do 10 reps. Maybe I'll just do 5 reps. But you never, ever once regret working out after the fact, when you're walking out and you feel the endorphins, and you feel great. And so I think just having that reminder going into it and understanding that this is going to be challenging because it's causing you to grow and transform, that it helps to stick in a little bit longer. And if you end up throwing in the towel, fine, you'll do better the next time.
Indeed. No, I'm very grateful that we got the chance to connect. Like I said at the beginning, we've been texting each other about other things, and you didn't ever once say to me, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to be on your podcast in 7 days." So I appreciate that. I very much look forward to meeting you again in person, maybe in Mexico City. We talked about that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you got the opportunity, and I got the opportunity, and the people listening to this got the opportunity to listen and hear from someone that clearly walks the walk, doesn't just talk it, you walk it, right? And I don't know if that made any sense, but whatever. But you have this presence, right? It's like, and that comes, I would imagine, from doing the kind of things that you've talked about doing here. Because if you didn't do those things, you wouldn't have that presence. It's just the way. That's just the way it is. I mean, it's just the way it is. So you're an example of someone who you're an example of like what someone can become if they just keep on going. They keep on walking. They sit in that field. They meditate. They keep on going until it all falls into place. Again, imperfectly, right? We're not here to throw perfection on anyone.
Yeah. Well, look, man, you're one of my favorite people. So,
oh, that's pretty
sweet. You truly are. I mean, it's interesting because my teacher used to say that lamp posts aren't meant to congregate together. You're meant to be out in the darkness and shining your light. And so if you don't get a chance to connect with a lot of other people who share that same energy, and you find yourself surrounded by people who seem to be energy vampires, it's probably because you're the light amongst that darkness. And that's the purpose that you're serving for that moment in time. Doesn't mean you stay there and all that, but that could be the purpose that you're serving for that moment in time. But that also is one of the reasons why, it's hard to get us in the same room together. It's just because we're so busy. When you're living your purpose, you don't have a whole lot of downtime to be out there, having, buddy trips and whatnot, because you're doing your thing. I'm doing my thing. But I do look forward to connecting at some point soon, because I just get so nourished by your presence. So thank you so much for inadvertently inviting me onto your podcast, because you didn't know why I was going to be on here.
No.
But you put the sequel, you put it in motion to have this conversation spontaneously occur. So thanks for that.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much. And no doubt we will meet again soon on the road.
100%.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello everyone, it's Leon here, aka The Kindness Guy. If you like my videos, which I hope you do, don't forget to press the subscribe button and also to ring the little bell so that the notifications notify you that I have a new video out in the world.